peninsula and were determined to reunite it under communist control, by force if necessary. Joseph Stalin, then the Soviet Union's dictator, feared that any direct fighting between the Koreas would ignite a new world war. Because of this, Stalin kept the Korean War dictator Kim Il-sung in check. But after the KGB, the Soviet secret police, learned that most of the American forces in the Pacific theater were in Japan, Stalin believed that the United States would be unable and unwilling to react in time and would not move to defend an already defeated Korea. He gave Kim Il-sung the go-ahead. On June 25, 1950, North Korean tanks rolled across the 38th parallel, surprising and routing the outgunned and unprepared Republic of Korea Army defenders. Within 5 days, the ROK Army lost 73,000 troops, and the capital of Seoul had fallen to the communists. 75,000 Korean communist troops, with indirect support from Communist China and the Soviet Union, overran the pro-Western South and soon occupied much of the peninsula. The attack on the Republic of Korea threatened to turn the Cold War into a full-scale global hot war, with the USA facing the possibility of being at war not only against North Korea, but also against Communist China and Russia. On top of this was the stark realization that both sides of this new conflict, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, by then had nuclear weapons capabilities. The possibility of a nuclear war was far too real. The Truman administration weighed its options. President Truman was afraid that if the communists took Korea, that many of the newly freed nations across the globe would also follow suit, otherwise referred to as the domino theory. When the U.S. received confirmation from the Soviet Union that they would not directly intercede on North Korea's behalf, President Truman ordered American forces to South Korea to begin America's involvement in the Korean War. The nearest U.S. forces available at that time were in occupied Japan. The U.S. Army hastily organized Task Force Smith and sped the force to Korea to prop up the resistance and to slow the North Korean advance. Stateside, the forces prepared for deployment. In the blazing heat of the Korean summer, Task Force Smith deployed and engaged the enemy, but they lacked any heavy weapons, and they had no logistical support to supply their operations. As a result, the soldiers of Task Force Smith were quickly pushed back into retreat by the communists. Communists pushed their assault all the way to a small section of the Korean peninsula surrounding the area, an area near the city of Busan. With Chinese supplies and Soviet support, North Korea looked ready to push the defenders into the sea. But time was not on the communist side. The United Nations passed UN Resolution number 83, which called for military aid to South Korea to push the North Koreans back to the 38th parallel. Reinforcements began to arrive from the United States mainland in September. Meanwhile, air forces from the newly established United States Air Force and the U.S. Navy wreaked havoc on North Korean infrastructure and transportation capabilities. When the U.S. reinforcements did arrive, the North Korean communists found themselves outnumbered. In September 1950, General Douglas MacArthur led an amphibious assault behind the North Korean lines at the coast of Incheon, led by the U.S. Marine Corps and soldiers from the ROK Army. On September 15th, American troops flooded into the peninsula behind the North Korean lines, and the U.S. 8th Army, who had been trapped at the Busan perimeter, broke out the next day. This sent the Koreans into a full retreat. Against all advice from China and the USSR, North Korean leader Kim Il-sung did not redeploy to meet the landing at Incheon, nor to defend Seoul. 9 days later, Seoul was recaptured, and the road to North Korea's capital, Pyongyang, was open. North Korea's People's Army was rapidly disintegrating, and on October 1st, 1950, UN forces crossed the 38th parallel and invaded North Korea. China had been ready to intervene from the beginning if it deemed it necessary. China had amassed troops along its border with North Korea. In October, the Chinese People's Volunteer Army silently moved across the border. When the UN troops reached the Yalu River, China made its move. Chinese first encountered Americans in November 1950 and routed the 8th Cavalry Division and forced its retreat, and then disappeared into the mountains. On November 13, 1950, Chinese forced the 8th U.S. Army to begin a retreat from North Korea. The U.S. Army's 10th Corps was surprised and encircled at the chosen reservoir. Weather again became an enemy of the soldier on the ground as sub-zero temperatures struck and held, and U.S. forces without adequate winter gear were faced with not only an overwhelming Chinese force, but also the very real threat of freezing to death. The infamous Battle of the Frozen Chosen had begun. UN forces, Korean refugees, and all supplies and materials began to flood back down the peninsula by land and sea, and UN forces were pushed back south of the 38th parallel. By Christmas of 1950, the Korean War had ground to a stalemate at the 38th parallel, the place it had started. For the next 2 years, the bloody war drug on with U.S. and UN forces, Koreans, and the Chinese continually fighting for, gaining control of, and then pulling back from the same pieces of ground over and over again. In November 1952, then President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower went to Korea to push for an end to the war, and he also instituted a get tough policy toward the communists. By thinly veiled threats of unleashing the national Chinese forces of Taiwan against the Chinese communists and the use of any force necessary, including the use of nuclear weapons, to end the war unless the peace negotiations that were currently underway began to move forward in earnest. President Eisenhower's new policies were effective, and the fighting ended on July 27, 1953. After 2 years of negotiations. The shooting stopped, but the war has never ended. The agreement that ended the fighting is an armistice and not a peace treaty, so the war is technically still ongoing. U.S. forces, North and South Korean soldiers still stare each other down across the DMZ today. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 took place at a time between America's costly but proud successes of World War II and then our traumatic experiences in Vietnam, and is frequently forgotten among the conflicts of the 20th century, and so is often referred to as the Forgotten War. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, there are over 1 million Korean War veterans still living, some of whom are with us here today. And I would ask those Korean War veterans who are present to stand at this time and be recognized. Thank you for your service. The U.S. lost 37,000 troops and suffered 102,000 wounded during that war. The Koreans and Chinese fared far worse, with estimates of approximately 4 million people, mostly civilians, killed, wounded, or missing. There are also some 7,800 Americans who remain unaccounted for from the Korean War. Accounting for those who are still missing remains a priority, with the Department of Defense, POW, and MIA accounting agency as they continue to work diligently to gain access to lost sites within both North and South Korea. Additionally, identifications continue through the use of forensic and DNA technology of remains that have already been returned to the U.S. by Korea. Of the more than 7,800 Americans who remain unaccounted for, 59 of those were from the state of Nebraska, including Cozad's own son, Robert H. Laier, who we are here to honor today. I'll read excerpts from an article written by Steve Wolf and published in March 2020 by the Dawson County Historical Society Museum. Captain Robert Holmes Laier was born on May 2, 1927, and lived on a farm south of Cozad. He attended Cozad High School, graduating in May 1945. He knew from an early age that he wanted to serve his country and fly airplanes. During high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Corps Reserve in July of 1944. Robert was honorably discharged from the Air Corps after Victory in Europe Day, so he enlisted in the Naval Reserve in June 1945. While serving at Camp Wallace with the Navy, Robert learned how to fly at Lynch Parish Aviation School in Rosenberg, Texas. Robert was honorably discharged from the Naval Reserve in 1946 and then enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and completed basic pilot training at Randolph Field, Texas, and then attended advanced training at Williams Air Force Base, Arizona. He graduated as a second lieutenant in the Air Force Reserve and was assigned to the 48th Fighter Squadron in Bangor, Maine, flying F-84 fighters. In 1949, he was reassigned to Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, and promoted to first lieutenant. In November 1950, in response to the June 25th invasion of South by North Korea, Lieutenant Laier's unit was deployed to Japan, and then on to Korea with the 4th Fighter Interceptor Group based at Kimpo, South Korea. The following year, during one of his missions, Lieutenant Laier's F-86 flight was engaged by Soviet fighters in the vicinity of Suncheon, North Korea. During that engagement, Lieutenant Laier's plane was shot down by the future Soviet MiG ace Nikolai Sutyugin. The following information from Soviet military files recalls the events of that day. Senior Lieutenant Nikolai Sutyugin departed a Chinese airfield just north of the Yalu River at 0934 on 18 June 1951. He was part of a group of 10 MiG-15s belonging to the 303rd Fighter Aviation Division. They were being vectored by ground control to a railroad complex near Suncheon at an altitude of approximately 24,000 feet. Lieutenant Sutyugin was in the covering flight when he spotted a pair of F-86s below and slightly behind him. He made a climbing turn to the left and then throttled back and initiated an attack on the Sabres, maneuvering into a superior firing position. And he gave the Sabres 2 short bursts of machine gun fire. The bursts missed, so he closed in for a better shot. The Sabres reacted by going into a dive, and after pulling out of that dive, the Sabres banked hard right, and then rolled to the left and began to climb. The MiG stayed with them, and the range dropped to 650 to 1,000 feet. Seeing this, the F-86 Sabres performed a half roll and dove. Lieutenant Sutyugin released his speed brakes and went after them, diving at an angle of 70 to 75 degrees. Pulling to within 500 to 650 feet, Lieutenant Sutyugin once again opened fire, this time hitting and shooting down Lieutenant Laier's plane. Robert Holmes Laier was declared missing in action and later declared deceased on February 1954. He was posthumously promoted to captain and awarded the Purple Heart, the Air Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster, and the Prisoner of War Medal. Captain Laier's other awards include the Korean Service Medal, the United Nations Service Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Korean Presidential Unit Citation, and the Republic of Korea War Service Medal. We now stand on ground donated to the museum by Robert Laier's parents in memory of their son, as we dedicate the memorial in his honor so that no one forgets the sacrifices made by him and by all those who served during the forgotten war. Thank you.
And representing the state of Nebraska and our nation is Senator Jim CUDABACK.
Good morning again. And no other event that I've ever been at or participated in or welcomed or whatever has been more pleasurable to me than this event right here. It's just absolutely one of those things that sticks out in your mind and will never, ever be forgotten. So with that, I'd like to have every veteran of any branch, they're all one to me, stand up and be recognized. All veterans, including myself. Now let's have a family stand up as well. The families of a veteran. That's great. Sometimes the veteran can't be here or passed on, but the families of veterans are here as well. And it gives me special pleasure. I served in Japan, and we had F-86s on our base. And this is Captain Laier was one that flew a F-86. So what more honor can you have who give his life? He gave his life, his all, for us, so we can be here and enjoy this wonderful day. So with that, thanks for coming, appreciate it, and we'll go on here.
Now if I could have the Cozad ambassadors come up to do the ribbon cutting. I'll ask Richard Laier to do the honors of cutting the ribbon. Robert Laier had one child, Richard, who is here today to honor his dad. I am pleased to welcome Richard back to his hometown of Cozad. After his remarks, he will do an unveiling of the monument in honor of his dad. Yep.
Good morning. My name is Richard Holmes Laier, unless you call me for jury duty, in which case I use the German pronunciation of liar. It doesn't work. Robert Laier was the man who gave me life. While his life was brief, it was full of fun and adventure. He pursued his dream, only to have it tragically end defending his country. There are people here today who knew Bobby Laier. They know his voice, they know his laughter, his sense of humor, and I am not one of them. Though the loss of Bob was difficult for my mom, she was able to move on with her life and remarried when I was 3. He too was an Air Force man and a wonderful dad. Being Robert was an only child and I the only grandchild, Mom would put me on a plane every summer so I could spend time with my grandparents on the farm. It turned out to be the greatest gift she'd ever given me. For over 50 years, I would come back to Cozad, stay on the farm south of town with my grandparents. I would also hear many stories of Bobby Laier, the boy and the man, from those who were his classmates, his friends, and family members. Yet how does one relate to someone you never knew, but is always referred to as your dad? My grandfather, Paul Laier, died in 1986, and my grandmother, Bernice Laier, in 2007 at the age of 103. I returned to Cozad to bury my grandmother and to dispose of her belongings. During that process, there was a pink plastic box that always sat on the back of the toilet, used as a Kleenex dispenser, and why I did what I did next, I will never know, but I opened it. Underneath the Kleenex box was a letter. It turned out to be the last letter Bob had written to his mother, dated June 16th, 1951. The last line read, "Am I a dad yet?" As I grew older, I came to embrace this man as one of 2 fathers, Robert Laier, who gave me life, and John Ernest, who raised me. I also felt it my obligation, while my grandmother was still alive, to dig deeper into really what happened. There were countless stories and written accounts of him having been taken prisoner and shipped off to China. So I reached out to the Korean MIA family organization, flew to Washington, D.C., to meet with them in a Russian delegation. The story goes his voice was heard on Peking radio by guys in the barracks. Sadly, Richard Dawson, my uncle, and the man responsible for introducing my mother to Bob, was not there to verify this account. I was even shown all the records of the men known to have spoken on Peking radio, with hopes of maybe finding a misspelling, but no luck. Many POWs were housed in camps along the North Korean border with China, but no Robert H. Laier appeared on their list. My grandmother even submitted DNA to Hawaii should any remains be found. Then one day I received a package in the mail with the Russian account of the aerial dogfight that took place over North Korea with the Russian MiGs on June 19, 1951. It was shortly thereafter I Googled Russian aces, and the first name on the list was Nikolai Vasilyevich Yegin. June 19, 1951. First victory? The F-86A of Robert H. Laier. This was the man who killed my father. 3 days later, I was born. His plane was last seen in a steep dive into the clouds at 10,000 feet. My closure has been the belief that he was dead before he hit the ground. So here I am again, back in Cozad, to honor a man I never knew, but grew to respect and realize the message he left for us all. It's not what my father was fighting for, it's what my father was fighting against, and that is intolerance. Communism was a threat to our allies and national security. It, along with socialism, fascism, and even nationalism, do not tolerate differences in people. We make America great because of our diversity and our ability to tolerate our differences. We are all different politics, different religions, beliefs, and different immigrant ancestry. Yet here we are, peacefully gathering for a single purpose, to honor an American who fought against intolerance. Lucky for us living today, the democracy created by our founding fathers continues to embrace all the differences in people. Without tolerance, we have no peace. Without tolerance, we have no democracy. Without tolerance, humanity may just destroy itself and give God a chance to try something else. After all, the dinosaurs had a pretty good run. Again, my dad and others who fought and died fighting against is equally important as what they were fighting for, so you and I could live in peace. Wars don't need to be fought to lose our democracy and freedoms. If we begin to view those around us as our enemy, then we will lose our democracy and dishonor those who fought and died for our country. Please honor the sacrifice my dad and all the other men and women made and continue to make by finding common ground with one another. Our democracy requires it. And so it's better for future generations. So my dad. I love small towns, especially Cozad. Thank you.
It is also important to honor some other special guests, beginning with Brad Teltier, commander of the Cozad Veterans in Foreign Wars. Please stand. Representing the Cozad Airport Authority is Leland Spanger, and members, please stand. Thank you. The Robert Henry Museum was given the lot by Robert's mother and father, Bernice and Paul Laier. She placed the stone there in honor of her son, and today this is where the new monument is enshrined. The board of directors are led by President Marlene Geiger. Please stand. Thank you. We are pleased that many members of the Laier and Dawson families are in attendance. They have traveled many miles to celebrate this occasion. Please stand. I also have a special gift for you if you want to come down here. All of you. Before closing, I would like to take this time to say a special thanks to those who have been a part of the planning in today's event and acknowledge on the back of your program. We are closing our ceremony with a playing of God Bless America, followed by a 21-gun salute and taps. Oh, hold on. It's not on here. Hold on 1 second. What are we supposed to do?
Just the Air Force song. We forgot the Air Force song.
Oh. The band is supposed to play the Air Force song.
Yes, let them play. Plus, it's a fun song.
the unveiling ceremony, so I was following the script.
You're sure.
Okay. Now we will have the closing with God Bless America and a 21 gun salute and taps. Once again, thanks for coming.
See a new monument unveiled to the Korean War veteran who grew up here in Cozad. Again, Sunday would have been his 94th birthday, was shot down during the Korean War by a Soviet MiG and then was declared dead in 1954, a couple years after being shot down. You saw his son gave a speech earlier today. His son Richard, born just a few days after he was shot down, was Robert Laier. And thank you again for joining us today. A fantastic ceremony to honor a Korean War veteran right here in a small town in the heart of our state. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll send you back to the studios for now.
We now join regular programming on News Channel Nebraska.
Behind, we tend to focus on what really matters: our families, our friendships, and the land and wildlife we share with those people. At Mossy Oak Properties, we get that, which is why when you need the road to lead to your favorite place, we're your land specialists. Mossy Oak Properties. Find your favorite place.
You're watching News Channel Nebraska, your home for Ag News.
I'm meteorologist Morris Laier with you.